I've had anxiety for most of my life. I'm not exactly sure when it first started. It has, for the most part, been pretty mild. It's been completely manageable. It's not something that's gotten in the way of my life, apart from maybe a few instances. But recently, over the past 2 weeks, I've had pretty severe anxiety, pretty crippling anxiety that has overwhelmed me and surprised me. It has completely taken me by surprise, and it's something that I'm working on right now. This is a vulnerable moment for me. I think for me, it's easy to open up my vulnerabilities about things that I've done in the past and that I've fixed, and now I'm standing on the mountaintop looking over on my past failures. And now in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm currently not at a moment of failure, but just at a moment of weakness and vulnerability. And I wanted to just talk about my experience, what I've been going through, and how I've been coping and dealing with anxiety. So for the longest time, I tricked myself into believing that I didn't have anxiety. It's kind of hard to pinpoint. It's hard to really observe if you're not paying attention. You can easily push the symptoms under the rug, but then there are the times when it's just impossible to ignore. And I'm sure that you've experienced anxiety in maybe even a mild form, in a mild way. You get nervous, you get overwhelmed, you start to really overthink what's going to happen in the future. You play through every scenario to the point where it feels uncontrollable. It feels like everything's going to fall apart, and even if you wanted to relax, you couldn't. I've felt like that oftentimes throughout my life, and for the most part, I've been able to work through it. There are those small ways that I get anxiety, like when I fly. 15, 20 minutes of anxiety on a flight is very normal for me. From the moment that the planes start to fly down the runway until we reach cruising altitude, I'm usually a mess. I'm usually very nervous. My palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, mom's spaghetti. But I get nervous. I do. My palms do get sweaty, and I'm just, every time there's a sound on the plane, every time there's a bump, every time I hear a beep of the intercom, I'm like, this is it. The plane's going down. There's no hope. Like, this is the last thing. And then I recently realized on a flight that we just had, Nat and I had, that if this plane doesn't, if I don't die in a plane crash, then all of this worrying was a complete waste of time. Even if I do die, I guess it kind of is a complete waste of time, because if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Worrying about it is certainly not going to help me. But that's the thing about anxiety and about worry, is that you really, unfortunately, I don't want to say you don't have control over it, but when it gets bad, you don't. And there are certainly ways to cope, but a lot of times it's just about pushing through. So Nat and I, we just had a recent trip overseas. We got back, we were moving apartments. So we had decided that 2 days after we got back from this trip, we're gonna move. Not the best timing, I know. So we move into this new apartment. It's a bit overwhelming, a lot's changing. I didn't have a lot of runway with the videos and the content that I'm creating on the YouTube channel, podcast, all that stuff. And I felt like there was so much going on that I think it just kind of shocked my system. And I started to get symptoms which I thought were an allergic reaction to the actual apartment that I'm living in. And I know that that sounds crazy. It sounds totally insane. The place was just refurbished, so it had that like new smell. And I just kept thinking in my head, I'm like, there's no way these symptoms is just in my head. This is just anxiety, me getting worried about something because I'm dizzy, I'm panicking, I can't walk straight, I have to sit down. Like most of the day I had to sit down because my shortness of breath, I couldn't catch my breath. It was all these symptoms, and I was like, this is crazy. How is this? This is not anxiety. I'm allergic to this apartment. This apartment is killing me. And I sat down with Nat, and it was kind of tough for me to even bring this up to her because I felt like an asshole. I felt like an idiot. I felt like this was all in my head, and I felt embarrassed and ashamed to be having these feelings or these thoughts. And I told Nat, and she helped to reassure me and calm me down, and she told me that the apartment almost certainly was not killing me, although she would keep that option open if that was the case. But it was she was just there for me and listened to me. We talked it through. The next day, it got a little bit better, though it was still there. And right now, this is 2 weeks since we've moved, and it's still there. It's gotten more mild as the days have gone on. I've found ways that have helped me get through it. Just rebuilding my routine, getting back to work has certainly helped. And then it's going to the gym, it's finding the things every day that make me feel like my life is grounded and rooted. Meditation, all these things have really helped me, but I'm not totally through or out of the woods yet. I still have a ways to go. And I guess the scariest thing about this whole thing is that you feel like you're out of control. You feel like how long is this going to last? How long am I going to have to deal with this? And then even when you have the good days, you're worrying that it's not going to last. And eventually those feelings and those physical symptoms are going to start to come back. I have worked through it partially in a way that I know how, although I just know that there will be tough days ahead. I'm sure of it. There will be times again where I will have to face this kind of uncertainty and doubt in my life. I am partially thankful for having this experience because it gives me a bit of empathy and compassion, a hell of a lot of compassion and empathy for other people who go through this, who go through it to a more severe extent than I have. And it also reassures me to know that if I'm able to get through this one time, I can do it again in the future. I can hopefully better learn to cope with these kinds of environmental changes and shifts in my life. So if anxiety is something that you're dealing with, it's something that you've struggled with in the past, know that trying to bury it, push it down, ignore it, pretend like it's not there is one of the worst things that you can do. When I started to feel better, it was the moment I talked to Natalie. I opened up, I had a conversation. This itself, having this conversation to you guys and with you guys, hopefully you can, talk about this and share your experience in the comments, has been super helpful. This to me feels like therapy. It feels like progress. And just know that if you're going through something, if you're struggling, there are lots of other people out there who are in a similar position. And we can use each other to help lift each other up, to provide support, to let each other know things that have worked for us. Appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next time.
This reality that you're living right now is not going to be your reality forever. I wrote a couple of weeks ago when I was really at a low point, I will just keep fighting through this until I find myself again on the other side. If you're in that same position right now, I know it's really hard to hear, but just trust me, your reality is not going to be like this forever.